In a small town, where dreams often stay just that, Mike Thompson's life revolves around two things: being the best dad he can to his teenage daughter Sarah and keeping his struggling garage afloat. Day after day, he fixes cars with skilled hands and unwavering honesty, never expecting anything in return. That's just who he is. When a sleek Ferrari pulls into his garage one evening, its elegant driver clearly out of place in their humble town, Mike does what he always does: stays late, fixes it properly, and charges only what's fair. He thinks it's just another day at work. But sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness have a way of coming back around in ways we least expect. Could this chance encounter with a mysterious woman be the moment that changes everything? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn morning crept through the blinds of Mike Thompson's modest kitchen, casting long shadows across the scattered college application papers on the table. His calloused fingers wrapped around a chipped coffee mug, steam rising like his hopes for his daughter's future. Sarah's unfinished essay lay there, a reminder of both promise and pressure. "Dad, have you seen my calculus notebook?" Sarah's voice carried down the stairs, followed by the familiar sound of her rushed footsteps. At 17, she was the spitting image of her mother. Same determined chin, same intelligent eyes. The thought brought a bittersweet smile to Mike's face. "Check the living room couch," he called back, already rising to help her search. "You were studying there last night." Their morning routine was a well-choreographed dance of preparation and conversation. Mike packed Sarah's lunch while she gathered her books, their movements synchronized by years of practice. The kitchen's yellow walls, though faded, held warmth in their worn familiarity. "The college application fee is due next week," Sarah mentioned, casually, but Mike caught the concern in her voice. He'd been dreading this conversation. "Don't worry about that, sweetheart. I've got it covered." The words tasted like a half-truth in his mouth. The garage's income had been thin lately, but he'd figure something out. He always did. Sarah paused, her hand on her backpack strap. "Dad, I could apply to the state college instead. It's cheaper." "And not a chance," Mike cut in, his voice gentle but firm. "You've worked too hard. Princeton's been your dream since freshman year." He watched her face brighten, even as his mind raced through potential ways to make ends meet. The drive to Riverdale High School was their time for dreams and plans. Sarah's excitement about her AP Physics project filled the cab of Mike's old pickup truck, its engine purring thanks to his meticulous maintenance. He listened, offering encouragement between her technical explanations, proud of how her mind worked. At the school entrance, Sarah leaned over to kiss his cheek, a gesture that hadn't changed since elementary school. "Love you, Dad. Don't work." "Too late tonight?" "Love you too, kiddo. We'll see about that last part." They shared a knowing look. Late nights at Thompson's Auto Repair were more rule than exception these days. The garage sat on the outskirts of town, a weathered building that had seen better days, but still stood proud. The faded sign above. The door read, "Thompson's Auto Repair, honest work, fair prices." His father's words, now his legacy. Inside, the familiar scent of motor oil and metal greeted him like an old friend. Eddie, his part-time helper, was already there, organizing. Tools with methodical precision. The kid reminded Mike of himself 20 years ago, before life had thrown its curveballs. "Morning, Mr. T. Mrs. Henderson called about her Buick. Says the timing belt's making noise again." Mike nodded, already reaching for his coveralls. "Tell her to bring it in. We'll take care of it." Mrs. Henderson was on a fixed income. He'd figure out a way to keep the cost manageable for her. The morning flowed into afternoon with the steady rhythm of work. Oil changes, brake repairs, diagnostic checks. Each car that came through his doors got the same attention to detail, regardless of make or model. It wasn't just about fixing cars, it was about taking care of people. Between customers, Mike's eyes kept drifting to the small office where he kept the books. The stack of bills grew taller each month, while the profit margins grew thinner. The big chain repair shop that had opened across town was drawing away customers with flashy promotions and corporate pricing. But Mike refused to cut corners or inflate prices. His reputation for honest work was all he had. During his lunch break, he pulled out Sarah's college application essay again. She'd asked him to review it, though they both knew her writing was better than his. The essay spoke about growing up in a single-parent home, about watching her father build a life from scratch after her mother left. Reading it brought back memories he usually kept tucked away. The early days of single parenthood, learning to braid Sarah's hair for school, working late while a neighbor watched her. The afternoon sun was casting long shadows through the garage doors when Eddie left for the day. Mike waved him off, then turned back to the Honda Civic he was working on. The owner needed it for work tomorrow, and Mike had promised it would be ready. As he worked, his mind wandered to Sarah's future. Princeton would open doors that had never been available to him. She deserved that chance, deserved every opportunity he could give her. The question was how to make it happen. The garage phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Probably Mrs. Henderson, about her Buick. Mike wiped his hands on a shop rag and reached for the receiver, unaware that his life was about to take an unexpected turn. The evening had settled into its usual quiet rhythm when the distinctive sound of an Italian engine cut through the silence. Mike was underneath Mrs. Henderson's Buick when he heard it, the unmistakable purr of 12 cylinders in perfect harmony, though something in that harmony was slightly off. The Ferrari's red paint caught the last rays of sunset as it limped into his lot, the engine note clearly indicating distress. Mike slid out from under the Buick, wiping his hands on his coveralls as the exotic car came to a stop. In 15 years of running the garage, this was his first Ferrari. The driver's door opened with elegant precision, and a woman stepped out. She moved with the kind of confidence that came from experience rather than arrogance, her business attire suggesting she'd come straight from the city. Mid-40s, Mike guessed, with an athletic build and intelligent eyes that assessed everything they saw. "I'm hoping you're still open," she said, her voice carrying a hint of worry beneath its composed surface. The engine started making unusual noises about 10 miles back. Mike was already circling the car, his trained ear picking up the subtle irregularities in the idle. "I'm Mike Thompson," he offered, extending a clean section of his shop rag as a gesture of greeting. "And yes, ma'am, we're open until the work's done." She smiled, taking his gesture in stride. "Alexandra Chen. I was on my way to a meeting when this started. I tried calling the dealership, but they're closed, and you were the only garage that showed up on my GPS." Mike nodded, already pulling up the Ferrari's service manual on his ancient laptop. The screen flickered to life reluctantly, its processing speed a stark contrast to the sophisticated machine before him. "Mind if I take a look?" Alexandra gestured her permission, and Mike began his initial diagnosis. The engine's symphony told a story to his experienced ears, a tale of precision engineering in minor distress. He methodically checked each system, his movements careful and deliberate around the expensive machinery. "Timing belt's starting to go," he said finally, straightening up. "You're lucky you stopped when you did. If it had failed completely, the damage would have been extensive." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "I can fix it, but I'll need to order the part. It won't be cheap." Alexandra's shoulders relaxed slightly. "The cost isn't an issue. What concerns me is whether it can be done tonight. I have an important meeting tomorrow morning." Mike glanced at his watch, then at the service manual's estimated repair time. "It'll take a few hours once I get the... In part, there's a parts supplier in the city who owes me a favor. I might be able to get them to deliver tonight." He made the call, speaking in the technical shorthand of long-time mechanics. When he hung up, he turned back to Alexandra. "Part will be here in about an hour. There's a diner down the street if you'd like to wait somewhere more comfortable." She shook her head, eyes moving around the garage with genuine interest. "If you don't mind, I'd prefer to stay. I find it fascinating to watch skilled people work." The comment wasn't delivered as flattery. There was something genuine in her observation that made Mike smile. "Suit yourself. Just mind the grease." As he waited for the part, Mike returned to Mrs. Henderson's Buick, aware of Alexandra's quiet presence. She'd settled into the garage's only chair, her laptop open but largely ignored as she watched him work. "You've been doing this a long time," she observed during a lull. Mike nodded, deep in concentration, as he adjusted the Buick's timing belt. "Since I was old enough to hold a wrench. My father owned this place before me. And now? Now it's just me and my part-timer, Eddie. He's in school, learning proper mechanical engineering." Mike smiled. "Kids going places." The conversation paused as Mike's phone buzzed, Sarah checking in. Their brief exchange must have carried something of their relationship in it, because when he hung up, Alexandra was looking at him differently. "Your daughter?" "Sarah," Mike confirmed, pride evident in his voice. 17 going on 30, smart as they come. Headed to Princeton if everything works out. "That's impressive," Alexandra said, and again there was nothing patronizing in her tone. "You must be proud." The parts delivery arrived before Mike could respond, the courier looking somewhat bewildered at finding himself delivering Ferrari components to a small-town garage. Mike signed for the package, then turned to Alexandra. "Last chance to reconsider. There are bigger shops in the city." She shook her head, a small smile playing at her lips. "I trust skilled hands over big names any day. Besides, I've watched you work for the past hour. You know what you're doing." Mike nodded, accepting both the trust and the responsibility it carried. He pulled up the service manual again, double-checking every specification. The Ferrari deserved nothing less than perfection, and he would deliver exactly that. The night deepened around them as Mike worked, the garage's fluorescent lights casting long shadows. Alexandra alternated between working on her laptop and watching him with quiet interest. There was something comfortable about her presence, a mutual respect. That required no conversation. Around 9, the sound of footsteps announced Sarah's arrival, dinner in hand. She stopped short at the sight of the Ferrari, then recovered quickly, handling the situation with her usual grace. "I thought you might need dinner," she said, setting down a bag that smelled of the local diner's best offerings. "I got extra, just in case." She glanced at Alexandra, who smiled warmly. "That's very thoughtful of you," Alexandra said, and Mike watched as his daughter and his unusual client fell into easy conversation about Sarah's college plans. The night wore on, marked by the steady progress of careful work and quiet conversations. There was something almost magical about it, the elegant Ferrari in his humble garage, the easy presence of Alexandra, the way Sarah's brief visit had added another layer of warmth to the evening. By midnight, the repair was complete. Mike ran through his final checks, listening to the engine's restored perfection with satisfaction. Every component was exactly where it should be, every specification met or exceeded. He closed the hood with a gentle click, knowing that this night would stand out in his memory for reasons he couldn't quite explain. The old family photo caught Alexandra's eye as Mike worked, a younger version of him teaching a small girl in pigtails how to hold a wrench. It sat on his workbench, protected from garage grime by a scratched plastic frame. Sarah couldn't have been more than 6 in that picture, Mike said, noticing Alexandra's interest. His hands remained steady on the Ferrari's timing belt assembly as he spoke. "She'd spend every Saturday morning out here with me learning about cars. Said she wanted to be just like her daddy." Alexandra smiled, moving closer to watch his careful movements around the engine. "And now? Now she's got her sights set on quantum physics." Pride mixed with something else in his voice, perhaps a touch of wistfulness. "She still helps out sometimes, but her future's in bigger things than small-town auto repair." The night had settled into a comfortable rhythm. The occasional click of tools against metal played counterpoint to their conversation, which flowed as smoothly as well-maintained machinery. Mike found himself sharing stories he hadn't thought about in years. "This was my father's toolbox," he said, reaching for a socket wrench. He taught me everything I know about cars, and quite a bit about life too. Used to say that every engine tells a story if you know how to listen. Alexandra leaned against the workbench, her suit jacket now carefully draped over the office chair. What story does this one tell? Mike paused, listening to the subtle harmonics of the Ferrari's idle. Right now, it's telling me about precision and patience, about how sometimes the most sophisticated things need the simplest care. He adjusted something minute, and the engine note changed slightly. There, hear that? That's the sound of everything being exactly where it should be. The conversation shifted as Mike worked, touching on their respective paths through life. Alexandra spoke of her own career with measured words that hinted at success, but revealed little. There was something refreshing about her reserve. No showing off, just quiet competence. Around 10, Mike took a break to check on the Buick he'd promised Mrs. Henderson. Alexandra followed, genuinely interested in the more modest repair. You treat them both the same, she observed, watching him work. The Ferrari and the Buick. Every car deserves respect, Mike replied, his focus unwavering. And every customer deserves honest work. My father used to say that integrity isn't something you can fake. It shows in everything you do, or it shows in everything you don't. A comfortable silence fell as Mike returned to the Ferrari. The repair required absolute precision, and Alexandra seemed to understand, content to watch and occasionally ask thoughtful questions about the process. The old coffee maker in the corner gurgled to life, filling the garage with the aroma of midnight fuel. Alexandra had insisted on making a fresh pot, seemingly determined to pull her weight in some small way. You know, she said, passing him a steaming mug. Most people would have been intimidated by this repair. It's not exactly a common car in these parts. Mike took a careful sip, his eyes still on the engine. An engine's an engine. Some are just dressed up fancier than others. The principles stay the same. It's all about understanding how things work together. He reached for another tool, his movements deliberate. Besides, I've got something better than experience with exotic cars. I've got patience and a good service manual. The comment drew a genuine laugh from Alexandra, a warm sound that seemed to fill the garage. Patience and a manual. You'd be surprised how many problems in life that combination can solve. As midnight approached, Sarah's earlier visit became a topic of conversation. She seems remarkable, Alexandra said, her tone genuine. You've done an amazing job with her. Mike's hands stilled for a moment on the timing belt. She makes it easy, never given me a day's trouble, even after. He trailed off, then continued with the repair. Alexandra waited, giving him space to either continue or let the thought go. After a moment, he chose to continue. Her mother left when Sarah was 8. Said small-town life wasn't enough for her. Mike's voice held no bitterness, just old acceptance. Sarah handled it better than I did, truth be told. Helped me as much as I helped her. He gestured to another photo on the wall, Sarah's middle school graduation. That was about 6 months after. I was still figuring out how to be both parents. Sarah's teacher called me in, worried because Sarah's hair was always messy for school. I didn't know how to braid it properly. He smiled at the memory. So I went to the library, got books on hairstyling, practiced on her dolls while she slept. By high school, I could do a French braid better than most mums. Alexandra's expression softened. That's what real parenting looks like. Not the big gestures, but the small things you do every day. Speaking from experience? Mike asked, catching something in her tone. She shook her head. Observation. My own father. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Let's just say, he wasn't the type to learn braiding for his daughter's sake. The night wore on, marked by the steady progress of the repair and the gentle ebb and flow of conversation. There was something almost therapeutic about working on the sophisticated machinery while sharing pieces of their lives. As Mike made the final adjustments, he found himself wishing, just for a moment, that the repair was more complicated, that it would take longer. There was something special about this night, about the unexpected connection formed over engine parts and midnight coffee. But every repair, like every story, has its end. Mike closed the hood with careful precision, knowing that in a few minutes Alexandra would drive away, leaving only the memory of this unusual evening. What he didn't know was that this repair was far from the end of their story. It was, in fact, just the beginning. The final moments of a repair always carried their own kind of magic. Mike stepped back from the Ferrari, wiping his hands on his shop rag as the engine purred with renewed perfection. The sound filled the garage like expensive music, every note, exactly where it should be. "That's what it's supposed to sound like," he said, satisfaction evident in his voice. He reached for his clipboard, beginning to write up the receipt. The numbers were straightforward, parts cost plus standard labor. No markup, no padding, just honest work at a fair price. Alexandra stood beside him, her eyes moving between the car and his hands as he wrote, "I know enough about these machines to know that what you just did was exceptional," she said quietly. "Most mechanics wouldn't have attempted this repair, especially not at night, especially not without specialized training." Mike shrugged, continuing to write. The manual had all the specifications. After that, it's just about paying attention and doing the work right. He paused, double-checking his figures. The timing belt itself wasn't cheap, but I didn't add any emergency fees for the late hour. When he handed her the receipt, Alexandra studied it with an expression he couldn't quite read. "This can't be right," she said finally. "This is barely more than what the dealership charges for routine maintenance." "It's the correct price," Mike replied firmly. "Parts at cost, standard labor rate. That's how we do things here." Alexandra reached into her purse, pulling out a sleek wallet. "I'd like to add something for keeping your shop open so late, at least." "You've gone well above and beyond." Mike shook his head, that same quiet firmness in his voice. "No, ma'am. Price on the receipt is the price for the work. Always has been, always will be." He gestured to the faded sign on the wall. "Honest. Work fair prices. My father put that up 30 years ago. It's not just words to me." Something shifted in Alexandra's expression. Respect mixed with something deeper, more contemplative. She wrote out a check for the exact amount on the receipt, her pen moving with practiced efficiency. As she handed it over, their fingers brushed briefly. A small moment, unremarkable really, except for the way it seemed to linger in the air between them. "I should warn you," Mike said, trying to lighten the suddenly charged atmosphere. "The check better not bounce. I know where you live." He paused. "Well, actually I don't, but I know what you drive, and there can't be that many red Ferraris around here." Alexandra laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "I think your detective work would be wasted. The check is good." She picked up her jacket from the chair, sliding it back on with fluid grace. "Though I admit, I'm curious what your recovery plan would have been." "Oh, you know, the usual small-town mechanic approach. Track down the mysterious Ferrari lady, demand payment, maybe challenge you to a high-stakes car race." He delivered it with such a straight face that it took her a moment to catch the joke. When she did laugh, it transformed her entire face. The polished businesswoman facade softened into something more real, more approachable. "A high-stakes car race in that truck of yours? Hey now," Mike protested, patting his old pickup's hood as they walked past it. "Don't underestimate this old girl. She's got character." They reached the Ferrari, its red paint gleaming under the garage lights. Alexandra ran her hand along its smooth flank, a gesture of appreciation rather than possession. "Character is underrated these days," she said softly. And Mike had a feeling she wasn't just talking about cars anymore. She opened the driver's door but paused before getting in. "Thank you, Mike. Not just for fixing the car, but for—" She gestured vaguely at the garage, as if trying to encompass the entire evening. The conversations, the coffee, the comfortable silences. "For all of it. Any time," Mike replied, meaning it more than he'd expected to. "Drive safely." He watched as she settled into the driver's seat, the car's interior lighting casting a soft glow around her. The engine started with a refined growl, settling into the smooth idle he'd restored. Alexandra gave him one last smile, somehow both warm and enigmatic, before easing the car out of the garage. Mike stood in the doorway, watching until the Ferrari's taillights disappeared around the corner. The night air was cool on his face, carrying the first hints of autumn. For a long moment, he stayed there, feeling as if something significant had just happened, though he couldn't quite say what. Finally, he turned back to the garage. There was still Mrs. Henderson's Buick to finish, and Sarah would be waiting up for him, probably working on her college applications. Life went on, reliable as a well-maintained engine. Still, as he returned to work, he couldn't shake the feeling that this night had been different. Something had shifted, like the subtle change in an engine's timing. Small, perhaps, but with the potential to affect everything that followed. He picked up his wrench, the familiar weight comforting in his hand. On his workbench, the receipt. Book lay open, Alexandra's check neatly placed beside it. Just another repair, he told himself, just another night at the garage. But even as he thought it, he knew it wasn't true. There had been something more here, in the conversations shared, over engine parts, in the way she'd looked at him when he refused extra payment, in the comfortable silences that had felt as natural as breathing. Tomorrow would be another day of oil changes and brake jobs, of balancing the books and worrying about Sarah's college fund. But tonight had been something special. Mike smiled to himself and turned back to Mrs. Henderson's Buick. The work waited, as it always did, but now it was accompanied by thoughts of dark eyes that saw more than they revealed, and a laugh that seemed to linger in the air like music. Dawn arrived with its usual whispered promises of possibility, finding Mike already at his kitchen table. Sleep had been elusive, his mind replaying moments from the night before. The sound of Alexandra's laugh, the way her eyes had sparkled when she'd caught his joke about the car chase. He shook his head, trying to focus on the morning paper in front of him. The kitchen filled with the familiar sounds of Sarah getting ready for school. She appeared in the doorway, already dressed, an envelope clutched in her hand. Her expression made Mike's heart skip. He knew that look. "It came," she said softly, holding up the envelope from Princeton. "Late yesterday. I was waiting for you to get home, but—" Mike pushed back his chair, coffee forgotten. "Well, don't keep your old man in suspense." Sarah's face broke into a brilliant smile as she pulled out the letter. "I got in, early admission." She launched herself into his arms, the way she used to when she was little. "Full academic scholarship consideration, Dad. They want me to interview for it next month." Joy and pride warred with practical concerns in Mike's mind, but he pushed the latter aside. This was Sarah's moment. "I knew you could do it, sweetheart." Never doubted it for a second. They celebrated with impromptu dancing in the kitchen, Sarah reading parts of the letter aloud, while Mike flipped pancakes one-handed. It wasn't until she was gathering her books for school that reality began to creep back in. "Even with a partial scholarship," Sarah said carefully, "we'll need to figure out housing costs, books, travel expenses." "Hey," Mike caught her hand. "Today is for celebrating. We'll figure out the rest." After Sarah left for school, Mike headed to the garage, his mind already calculating numbers. The morning brought its usual parade of customers, but there was an unusual buzz in the air. Seemed like news traveled fast in their small town. "Heard you had quite the visitor last night," Mrs. Henderson said as she picked up her Buick. "A Ferrari," Tommy at the diner said, "red as a cardinal's wing." Mike smiled, keeping his focus on her invoice. "News travels fast." "And that's not all," she continued, leaning in conspiratorially. "Jenny's boy was out at the old airfield this morning. Says he saw a private jet landing. Quite the excitement for our little town." Before Mike could respond, Eddie burst through the door, waving. "His phone. Mr. T, you're not going to believe this. That Ferrari lady from last night, she's all over the business news." Mike took the offered phone, his coffee cup freezing halfway to his lips. There on the screen was Alexandra, looking elegantly professional, in a business suit, standing in front of a sleek corporate building. The headline read, "Tech Pioneer Alexandra Chen announces major innovation hub initiative." She's like, seriously important. Eddie continued, practically bouncing with excitement. CEO of Chen Innovations. They're this huge tech company that's been buying up land all over the country, building these amazing research centers. Mike handed the phone back, his mind spinning. The Alessandro Chen? The woman who'd sat in his garage drinking coffee and sharing stories about her father was one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs in the country. Before he could process this information, his phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Dad, did you see the news? A private jet just landed at the airfield. Everyone at school is talking about it. They say some big tech company is looking at building something here. How crazy is that?" Mike stared at his phone, then at the check still sitting in his receipt book from last night. The same elegant signature that had been in countless business magazines was right there on his counter, paying. For a simple timing belt repair. The morning sun streamed through the garage windows, illuminating the dust motes in the air. Something was changing, he could feel it. Like the moment before an engine turns over, when possibility hangs in the air. He picked up his wrench, turning, back to the Honda he was working on. Whatever was coming, right now, there was work to be done. But he couldn't help wondering what Alexandra Chen's return might mean. For the town, for Sarah's future, and maybe, just maybe, for him. The late morning sun cast long shadows across the garage floor when Mike heard it. The distinctive sound of luxury car engines, multiple ones, approaching his shop. He was under a Chevy pickup when the vehicles pulled in. They're synchronized, a rival bringing a sudden quiet to the normal garage bustle. Eddie's sneakers appeared beside the pickup. Mr. T, you might want to see this." Mike slid out from under the truck, wiping his hands on his coveralls, and found himself facing not one, but 3 black Mercedes sedans parked in perfect formation. As he watched, Alexandra emerged from the middle car, dressed in an elegant business suit, but wearing the same warm smile he remembered from the night before. "Good morning, Mike," she said, her voice carrying the same genuine quality it had during their late-night conversations. "I hope you don't mind the entourage. Corporate policy, I'm afraid." She gestured to the serious-looking men in suits who had emerged from the other cars. "They get nervous when I travel alone." Mike found himself smiling despite his surprise. "Well, can't blame them, especially after that timing belt incident." He paused, taking in the scene. "Though I have to say, this is a lot of firepower just to check on a repair." Alexandra's eyes sparkled with amusement. "The Ferrari's running. Perfectly, thanks to you." "Actually, I'm here about something else." She glanced around the garage. "Is there somewhere we could talk privately?" Mike led her to his small office, acutely aware of its worn furniture and faded walls. Alexandra settled into the visitors, chair with the same easy grace she'd shown in the garage the night before, seemingly unbothered by the humble surroundings. "First," she said, reaching into her briefcase, "I want you to see something." She handed him a business card, heavy cardstock, elegant design, with her name and title clearly displayed. Alexandra Chen, CEO, Chen Innovations. "I should have introduced myself properly last night," she continued. "But it was nice, having a conversation where my title didn't matter." Mike studied the card, then set it carefully on his desk. "You weren't exactly hiding who you were. I just wasn't paying attention to the right things." "No," Alexandra said softly. "You were paying attention to exactly the right things. That's partly why I'm here." She leaned forward slightly. "What do you know about Chen Innovations, Mike?" He shrugged. "Only what I've heard. You're doing something revolutionary with sustainable technology, building research centers across the country. Innovation hubs," she corrected gently. "Places where technology meets practical application. And we're building our next one here, in your town." Mike's eyebrows rose. "Here? Why? Originally?" "Because the location was perfect, close enough to the city but with room to grow." She paused, meeting his eyes. "Now, because I found something else here, something rare." She reached into her briefcase again, pulling out a folder. "Last night, I watched you work, watched how you approached a complex problem with patience and precision. Watched how you treated both the machine and the customer with respect. That's exactly the kind of practical wisdom we need. Mike's mind was racing, trying to keep up. What exactly are you saying? I'm offering you a job, Mike, head of practical applications at the new facility. You'd be working with some of the best engineers in the world, helping bridge the gap between theoretical innovation and real-world application. She opened the folder, revealing contracts and specifications. Full benefits, of course, including a comprehensive college fund for Sarah. The mention of Sarah's name brought Mike's whirling thoughts into sharp focus. How did you? Alexandra smiled. I did my homework after I left last night. Your reputation in this community is remarkable. Everyone I talked to had a story about how you'd helped them, worked with them on payments, gone above and beyond. She laid another document on his desk. We're also interested in your property. The garage's location would be perfect for our community outreach center. We're prepared to make a very generous offer. Mike stared at the papers, then at Alexandra. This is a lot to take in. I know, she said gently, and I want you to take your time considering it. But Mike, she waited until he met her eyes. This isn't charity. This is me recognizing exactly what my company needs. Sometimes the most sophisticated problems require simple wisdom to solve. You have that wisdom. Through the office window, Mike could see Eddie working on a car, could hear the familiar sounds of the garage, his father's garage, that had been his whole world for so long. When he turned back to Alexandra, he found her watching him, with understanding in her eyes. Take some time, she said, standing. Talk it over with Sarah. I'll be in town for the next few days. She placed a sealed envelope on his desk. The formal offer's in here, along with my personal number if you have any questions. As she reached the door, she paused. Oh, and Mike, thank you again for last night. It's been a long time since anyone treated me like just another person with a broken-down car. The contract lay open on the kitchen table, its pages crisp and official under the evening light. Mike had read it 3 times now, each figure more staggering than the last. The salary alone would cover Sarah's college expenses twice over. The property offer for the garage would clear every debt he'd ever had, with enough left to secure their future. Sarah sat across from him, her AP physics homework forgotten beside her, eyes wide as she processed the details. Dad, this is incredible, but are you okay? I mean, the garage is everything to you. Mike looked up from the contract, studying his daughter's face. She'd always been able to read him better than anyone. The garage was my father's dream, he said slowly, and it's been good to us, but maybe it's time to think about your dreams. Now, my dreams aren't more important than yours, Sarah protested, but Mike held up a hand. You remember what Grandpa used to say about engines? How sometimes you have to rebuild them completely to make them run better? He smiled at the memory. Maybe that's what this is. A chance to rebuild, to make something better for both of us. The evening sun cast long shadows across the contract's pages as they discussed the possibilities. Sarah's practical nature emerged as she made lists of pros and cons, her neat handwriting filling a notebook page. The innovation hub would bring jobs to town, she noted, pen moving quickly. Mrs. Henderson's son might not have to move away for work, and Emily's dad, he's been looking for a technical position since the factory closed. Mike nodded, remembering countless conversations with customers about their children leaving town for opportunities elsewhere. Alexandra, Ms. Chen, said something about a community outreach center, training programs, educational initiatives. And you'd be perfect for that, Sarah said earnestly. Dad, you've been teaching people about cars their whole lives. This would just be bigger. She paused, then added softly, plus you seemed different when you talked about her. About last night. Mike felt warmth creep into his cheeks. This isn't about that. This is about making the right decision for our future. Can't it be about both? Sarah's smile was knowing. I saw how you looked when you told me about fixing a car. You lit up. Before Mike could respond, a knock at the door interrupted them. It was Eddie, still in his work clothes, looking uncertain. "Sorry to bother you at home, Mr. T, but, well, some of the regular customers heard about the offer. They're at the garage. They want to talk to you." Mike found his garage full of familiar faces. Mrs. Henderson was there, and Joe from the hardware store, Tom the retired teacher, and at least a dozen others. They looked up as he entered, their expressions a mix of concern and hope. "We heard about Chen Innovation's offer," Mrs. Henderson said, stepping forward. "About the Innovation Hub and the job they offered you." Mike nodded slowly. "News travels fast in a small town. We wanted you to know," Tom said, his teacher's voice carrying clearly, "that while we'd miss you at the garage, this could be good for all of us. The town needs something like this, and they need someone like you to help build it right." One by one, they shared their thoughts. How the hub could bring their children home, how the training programs could give people new starts, how having someone they trusted involved would make the transition easier. "You've helped all of us at one time or another," Joe said gruffly. "Maybe this is your chance to help the whole town." As Mike looked around at these people, not just customers, but friends, neighbors, community, he felt something shift inside him. The garage had always been about more than fixing cars. It had been about helping people, making things work better, building trust. Maybe this was just a bigger version of the same thing. Later that night, after the impromptu gathering had dispersed, and Sarah had gone to bed, Mike sat alone in the quiet garage. His father's old toolbox sat on the workbench, its dents and scratches telling stories of years of honest work. He pulled out his phone and looked at the number Alexandra had left. Sometimes, he thought, the biggest decisions felt the smallest. When they were right, the phone rang twice before she answered. "Alexandra, it's Mike Thompson. About that offer, I'd like to discuss the details." The keys felt heavier than usual in Mike's hand as he stood in the garage's doorway one last time. 30 years of memories lived in these walls. First with his father, then on his own, teaching Sarah, helping neighbors, building a life one repair at a time. The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching dust motes in its beam, making everything look softer, more nostalgic. "Need help with anything else?" Eddie asked from behind him. The young man had arrived early, insisting on being there for this moment. In their discussions with Alexandra, it had been decided that Eddie would manage the garage's transition into the community center, overseeing repairs until the renovation began. It felt right, passing the torch to someone who understood what this place meant. "Just taking one last look," Mike replied, running his hand along the worn workbench. His father's old toolbox had already been packed up. It would have a place of honor in his new office at the Innovation Hub. Alexandra had insisted on that. The meeting to finalize everything had been surprisingly emotional. Alexandra had understood instinctively that this wasn't just a property acquisition. It was the passing of an era. She'd listened quietly as Mike shared stories about the garage's history, then laid out a vision for its future that honored that legacy. "The community center will always have a working garage component," she'd promised. "A place where people can learn, where skills can be passed on, different from what it was, but carrying the same spirit." Now, walking through the familiar space, Mike could almost see those future possibilities overlaid with the past. The corner where he'd taught Sarah to change oil would become a training area. The office where he'd worked out payment plans with struggling customers would house education programs. His phone buzzed, a text from Alexandra. "Taking the leap is always the hardest part, but I've got a feeling you're going to fly." The message brought a smile to his face. Their conversations over the past week had evolved from purely professional to something warmer, though both maintained a careful distance while the business arrangements were being finalized. Sarah appeared in the doorway, camera in hand. "Dad, I thought maybe we should take one last picture for the album." Mike nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Sarah had been his rock through this transition, her excitement about the future, helping to ease the weight of leaving the past behind. She'd already started an internship program at the Innovation Hub, her natural aptitude for physics making her an instant hit with the research team. They gathered in front of the old sign. Mike, Sarah, Eddie, and a few regular customers who'd stopped by to say goodbye. As Sarah set up the timer on her camera, Mike felt Mrs. Henderson slip her hand into his. "Your father would be proud," she whispered, "not just of what you did here, but of what you're doing now. Sometimes the bravest thing is knowing when to let go." The camera flashed, capturing the moment, the end of one chapter, the beginning of another. Mike reached for his toolbox, the one his father had given him on his 16th birthday. Its weight was familiar, comforting. "Ready?" Sarah asked softly. Mike took one last look around the garage. The memories would always be here, teaching. Sarah to use a wrench, late-night emergency repairs, countless conversations over coffee and carburetors. But it was time for new memories, new challenges, new ways to help people. "Yeah," he said finally. "I'm ready." As they walked out, Eddie called after them. "Mr. T, thank you for everything. I'll make sure it stays special." Mike turned back one last time, seeing not just Eddie, but all the years of history, all the lives touched, all the trust built and maintained. "I know you will, kid. I know you will." In the parking lot, Alexandra stood waiting beside her car, not the Ferrari this time, but a more modest vehicle. She'd insisted on driving him to the hub herself for his first day. Her presence felt right somehow, a bridge between past and future. As Mike locked the garage door for the last time, he felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. The keys weren't really heavy at all, he realized. What had felt like weight was actually the accumulated trust of his community, the legacy of his father, the promise of tomorrow. He handed the keys to Eddie, clapped him on the shoulder and turned toward his future. Sometimes the biggest changes in life came disguised as broken-down Ferraris and late-night repairs. Sometimes letting go of one dream made room for another, bigger one to take root. Sometimes you had to close one door to open another. The Innovation Hub rose from the morning mist like something from the future, all gleaming glass and sweeping lines. Mike adjusted his collar, feeling slightly out of place in his new business-casual attire. The employee badge clipped to his belt caught the early sunlight, its pristine surface a stark contrast to the grease-stained ID he'd worn at the garage. "Nervous?" Alexandra asked beside him, her voice carrying a gentle warmth that had become familiar over the past week. She'd insisted on giving him the tour herself, clearing her morning schedule despite protests from her assistant. "Like a teen at his first job interview," Mike admitted, managing a smile, "though I suspect most teens don't have the CEO as their personal guide." "Most teens don't rebuild Ferrari engines by moonlight either," she countered, leading him through the main entrance. The lobby opened up before them, a soaring space filled with natural light and the quiet hum of innovation at work. What struck Mike first wasn't the impressive architecture or the state-of-the-art technology visible everywhere. It was the people. Engineers in casual wear clustered around workstations, their animated discussions punctuated by laughter. Technicians moved purposefully between labs, carrying prototypes and tablet computers. The atmosphere was alive with the kind of energy he'd always felt in his garage when tackling a particularly interesting problem. "Welcome to your new world," Alexandra said, watching his reaction. "Different from the garage, I know, but I think you'll find the spirit is similar. Everyone here is trying to make things work better." Their first stop was his office, a comfortable space with large windows overlooking the technical workshop. Below, his father's toolbox already sat in a place of honor on a custom-built shelf, looking somehow both out of place and perfectly at home among the modern furnishings. "I had them install some traditional workbenches in your section," Alexandra explained, leading him to the adjacent workshop. "The engineers can theorize all they want, but sometimes you need to get your hands dirty to understand how something really works." The workshop was a perfect blend of old and new, traditional tools alongside cutting-edge diagnostic equipment. Classic workbenches next to holographic design displays. Mike ran his hand along a familiar-looking wrench set, feeling some of his nervousness fade. This is where you'll be bridging the gap between theory and practice, Alexandra continued. Our engineers are brilliant, but sometimes they need someone who understands how things work in the real world. Someone who knows that the cleanest solution isn't always the most practical one. As if on cue, a young engineer approached, tablet in hand and frustration evident on his face. Miss Chen, oh, you must be Mr. Thompson, thank goodness. We've been struggling with the practical application of the new hybrid engine cooling system. The simulations look perfect, but in real-world testing. Mike found himself drawn into the discussion, his decades of hands-on experience offering insights that the computer models had missed. Before he knew it, he was rolling up his sleeves, literally and figuratively, working alongside the engineering team to solve the problem. By lunchtime, he'd helped resolve 3 different practical application issues, each solution drawing on his years of real-world experience. The engineers, far from being dismissive of his less theoretical approach, seemed genuinely excited to learn from his practical knowledge. See, Alexandra said as they walked to the cafeteria, you're already making a difference. That cooling system problem had been stumping them for weeks. Mike nodded, still processing the morning's events. It's strange. The technology is way beyond anything I've worked with before, but the basic principles, they're the same ones I've been using all my life. That's exactly why you're here, Alexandra replied. Innovation isn't just about creating new things. It's about understanding how they'll work in the real world, how they'll affect real people. As they got their lunch, Mike noticed Sarah across the cafeteria, deep in discussion with a group of young researchers. She caught his eye and waved, her smile bright with pride and excitement. She's already making quite an impression in the physics department, Alexandra noted. They say she has a unique way of looking at problems, seeing both the theoretical and practical sides. Wonder where she got that from. Mike watched his daughter gesturing animatedly about something scientific, completely in her element among the researchers. Maybe that was the key to this transition, not trying to become something entirely new, but bringing the best of his old world into this new one. You know, he said thoughtfully, I think I'm going to like it here. Alexandra's smile held something more than professional satisfaction. I never doubted it for a moment. Mike stared at his phone, reading Alexandra's text for the 3rd time. Dinner tonight? There's a new place in town I'd like to try. Just us. His thumb hovered over the reply button as he sat in his office, the evening sun casting long shadows across his father's old toolbox. The past month had been a whirlwind of adjustment. During the day, he moved between engineering meetings and practical demonstrations, translating complex theories into workable solutions. His simple approaches often cut through weeks of theoretical deadlock, earning him growing respect from the technical teams. But it was the quiet moments that challenged him most, the late-night texts with Alexandra that strayed from professional to personal, the shared glances across conference rooms, the coffee breaks that seemed to stretch longer than necessary. He typed out a response. Dinner sounds great. 7 p.m. Simple, safe, like working on an engine, one step at a time. Her reply came quickly. Perfect. And Mike, leave the technical manuals at home. The workday passed in a blur of activity. Sarah caught him between meetings, her excitement palpable as she shared news about her internship project. Dad, the quantum research team actually implemented my suggestion. They said my practical perspective helped them see the problem differently. She paused, studying his face. You seem distracted. Everything okay? Just busy. He deflected, but Sarah's knowing smile told him she wasn't fooled. Would this distraction have anything to do with Ms. Chen asking me about your favorite restaurants? Yesterday? Mike felt warmth creep into his cheeks. You know, for a quantum physics intern, you spend an awful lot of time playing matchmaker. Someone has to, Sarah replied with a grin. You're both too busy being professional to see what's right in front of you. The new restaurant was intimate, tucked away in what used to be an old bookstore. Alexandra was already there when he, arrived dressed casually but elegantly, looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her at the hub. "No security detail tonight?" he asked, settling into his chair. "I convinced them I'd be safe with the man who fixed my Ferrari." Her smile held a hint of mischief. "Though I think they're parked around the corner, just in case you try to challenge me to that high-stakes race you threatened." The tension broke, and conversation flowed easily between them. Alexandra shared stories about her early days building her company, the challenges of being underestimated, the satisfaction of proving doubters wrong. Mike found himself opening up about raising Sarah alone, about maintaining his father's legacy while building his own. "You know," Alexandra said, twirling her wineglass thoughtfully, "when my Ferrari broke down that night, I was actually on my way to cancel the plans for the innovation hub here." Mike's surprise must have shown on his face because she continued quickly. "The initial surveys were promising, but something felt missing. I couldn't put my finger on it until I spent that night in your garage." "What changed?" "I saw how deeply connected you were to this community, how your technical skill was matched by your understanding of people. That's what our hubs needed, not just innovation, but heart." She met his eyes. "You changed more than just my travel." Plans that night, the moment hung between them, full of possibility. But before Mike could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent message from the hub's security team. One of the prototype engines had developed an issue during evening testing. Alexandra read the message over his shoulder and sighed. "Duty calls?" "I'm sorry," Mike started, but she was already standing, reaching for her coat. "Don't be. Let's go fix it together." The drive to the hub was comfortable, filled with easy conversation and shared purpose. In the lab, they worked side by side, Mike's practical experience complementing Alexandra's technical knowledge. By midnight, the problem was solved, the prototype running smoothly again. Standing in the empty lab, their success still hanging in the air between them, Alexandra turned to Mike. "You know, this wasn't exactly how I planned our first date to end." Mike's heart skipped at the word date. "Who says it's over?" he replied, surprising himself with his boldness. "There's a great all-night diner near here, best pie in town." Alexandra's smile lit up her whole face. "Lead the way, Mr. Thompson." As they walked to his truck, Mike felt something settle into place. Sometimes the best innovations weren't about technology at all. They were about finding new ways to be yourself, about building something unexpected from familiar parts. The old magazine article lay on Mike's desk, its glossy pages showing signs of frequent handling. The headline read, "Alexandra Chen, the mechanic's daughter who revolutionized tech." He'd found it while researching project documentation, and suddenly many things about Alexandra made more sense. The article detailed her early life, growing up in her father's struggling garage, learning to fix engines before she could drive, watching the business fail when corporate chains moved in. It could have been his own story, except for the ending. Alexandra had channeled that loss into determination, building her tech empire with a foundation of practical knowledge and a deep understanding of working people. A soft knock at his office door interrupted his reading. Alexandra stood there, a knowing look in her eyes when she saw the magazine. "I wondered when you'd find that," she said, settling into the chair across from him. "Though I'm surprised it took this long, given Sarah's thorough research skills." Mike smiled, remembering his daughter's hints about Alexandra's background. "She knew, didn't she? That's why she kept pushing us together." "Smart girl," Alexandra replied. "Like father, like daughter. You both see through to what matters." She reached for the magazine, her fingers tracing the old photograph of her father's garage. "That's why I was really in your town that night, you know." Mike leaned forward, intrigued. "I thought it was about the innovation hub location." "Partially, but I'd been visiting small garages across the country, watching them struggle against the same forces that killed my father's business." Her voice carried old pain, tempered by purpose. The innovation hubs were always meant to be more than just research centers. They're about preserving practical wisdom, about bridging the gap between traditional skills and new technology. The pieces clicked into place. That's why you insisted on keeping the garage component in the community center. Alexandra nodded. When my Ferrari broke down, I thought it was just bad luck. But watching you work that night, seeing how you treated every customer like family, how you passed your knowledge to Eddie. She paused, collecting her thoughts. You reminded me of my father, but with one crucial difference. You hadn't given up. You'd found a way to keep his spirit alive while adapting to change. Mike thought about his own father, about the lessons passed down through generations of mechanics. Your father's garage, what happened to it? Strip mall now, Alexandra said quietly. I tried to buy it back years ago, but it was too late. That's part of why this project means so much to me. It's not just about innovation, it's about preservation, about finding ways to keep craftsmanship alive in a digital age. She stood, moving to the window that overlooked the workshop below. Young engineers worked alongside experienced technicians, theory and practice merging seamlessly. Look at them. The engineers are learning things they never could from simulations alone, and the technicians are seeing how their practical knowledge fits into the bigger picture. Mike joined her at the window, their shoulders nearly touching. Is that why you offered me the job? Because I reminded you of your father. Alexandra turned to face him, her expression serious. I offered you the job because you showed me something I'd been looking for my whole career. Someone who understood that progress doesn't have to mean leaving tradition behind. The fact that you reminded me of the best parts of my father, that just helped me recognize what I was seeing. Their eyes met, and Mike saw in hers the same passion for building, fixing. Improving that had driven him his whole life. Without thinking, he reached for her hand. Your father would be proud, he said softly, not just of your success, but of how you're using it to help others. Alexandra's fingers tightened around his. I wish he could have met you. He would have loved your garage. She smiled, blinking back unexpected tears. Though he probably wouldn't have let you work on his Ferrari. No, he was very particular about Italian engines, wouldn't let anyone but himself touch them. Her laugh carried both sadness and joy. He would have tested you first, probably, with something American, a Corvette maybe. Good thing you're not as particular, Mike said, drawing her closer. Good thing, she agreed, and when she kissed him, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, like the perfect fit of a well-machined part, like the satisfying click of everything falling into place. Below them, the hub hummed with activity, old wisdom and new ideas, mixing and merging, creating something stronger than either could be alone. Just like them. The restoration project plans covered Mike's entire desk, a maze of technical drawings and specifications that represented the hub's most ambitious undertaking yet. They were going to rebuild a classic 1957 Chevrolet Belair, but not just as a restoration. They would integrate cutting-edge, sustainable technology while preserving its vintage soul. It's impossible, declared Derek, one of the senior engineers, staring at the plans. We can't maintain the original aesthetics and meet modern efficiency standards. The systems won't fit in the original engine compartment. Mike studied the drawings, his mind already breaking down the problem into manageable pieces. That's because you're trying to adapt the car to the technology. We need to adapt the technology to the car. Alexandra stood in the doorway, a quiet smile playing on her lips as she watched Mike take charge. This was his element, the perfect fusion of old and new. Look, Mike continued, pulling out a pencil and sketching on the plans. The Bel Air's engine bay is actually bigger than you think. These walls aren't structural. They're decorative, if we modify them here and here. His pencil moved confidently across the paper. We can create space for the hybrid system without compromising the car's lines. The engineering team gathered around, their initial skepticism giving way to interest as Mike explained his vision. He wasn't just preserving a classic car, he was showing them how to honor its heritage while embracing the future. The real challenge, Mike explained, isn't fitting new technology into an old car. It's understanding why these cars were built the way they were and using that knowledge to make them better. Over the next few weeks, the project became a symbol of everything the Innovation Hub stood for. Mike's practical experience guided the technical team through countless challenges, while their innovative solutions helped him see new possibilities in familiar mechanics. Late one evening, as they worked on the prototype hybrid system, Alexandra brought coffee to the workshop. She found Mike under the Belair, teaching a young engineer about the car's original design philosophy. "See these body panels," Mike's voice carried from beneath the car. They weren't just about style, they were designed for easy repair, so owners could maintain their own vehicles. "We need to keep that spirit in our design." Alexandra set the coffee down and leaned against a workbench, remembering similar lessons from her father. The engineer emerged from under the car, face lit with understanding, while Mike continued his explanation. "That's what makes this project special," Mike said, sliding out and accepting the coffee Alexandra offered. "We're not just making an old car run on new technology. We're showing how innovation can preserve craftsmanship." The engineer nodded eagerly. "I get it now. It's like coding. You don't just write new programs, you build on existing architecture when it makes sense." "Exactly," Mike smiled. "Now you're thinking like a mechanic and an engineer." After the engineer left, Alexandra settled beside Mike on the workshop bench. "You know, when the board approved this project, they saw it as a technical showcase, but you've turned it into something more." Mike took her hand, his fingers still slightly greasy despite the shop rags. "I learned that from you. Everything you've built here is about more than just technology." She squeezed his hand, understanding in her eyes. "My father used to say that the best mechanics are really teachers. They don't just fix things, they help people understand how things work." "Smart man," Mike said softly. "I wish I could have met him. He would have loved this." Alexandra gestured to the Belair. "Not just the technology, but the way you're bringing people together to create something new while honoring the old." The project continued to evolve, becoming a perfect metaphor for their relationship. The seamless blend of different worlds, the respect for tradition, combined with excitement for the future. Every challenge they faced brought them closer, their different perspectives creating solutions neither could have found alone. As the weeks passed, the Belair began to take shape. Its classic lines remained unchanged, but beneath the surface, it housed technology that would have seemed like science fiction to its original builders. Yet somehow, thanks to Mike's guidance, it all felt right, a bridge between eras, a testament to the possibility of progress without loss. Just like the car, Mike and Alexandra's relationship grew stronger through every challenge, every late-night discussion, every shared moment of triumph when a problem was solved. They were building something unique together, something that honored the past while embracing the future, and like all the best engineering solutions, it worked perfectly because of its simplicity. Two people who understood that the strongest connections are built on respect, understanding, and the willingness to learn from each other. The sound of breaking ceramic echoed through Mike's office as his favorite coffee mug, a Father's Day gift from Sarah, slipped from his tired hands and shattered on the floor. He stared at the pieces, seeing in them a reflection of his current state. The Belair project had hit a critical snag. The integration of the hybrid system was causing unexpected power fluctuations, and the board was getting nervous about the timeline. 3 days of continuous testing had yielded no solutions, and the strain was showing on everyone. "Dad?" Sarah stood in the doorway, concern etched on her face. "You've been here all night again, haven't you?" Mike rubbed his eyes, avoiding both the broken mug and his daughter's worried gaze. "Just trying to figure this out. The power distribution isn't matching the simulations, and the board presentation is in 2 days." "Maybe that's the problem," Sarah said, kneeling to help. "Clean up the broken ceramic." "You're approaching this like it's still the garage, where you could work until you solved the problem. But this is different." "Is it?" Mike's voice carried an edge of frustration. "A problem's a problem. You work at it until you fix it. Except, you're not just fixing cars anymore, Dad. You're managing a team, presenting to a board, dating the CEO." She paused, choosing her words carefully. When was the last time you and Alexandra had a real conversation? Not about work. The question hit home. He and Alexandra had barely spoken outside of project meetings in the past week. Every time she'd tried to discuss anything personal, he'd steered the conversation back to the Belair's problems. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Derek, the senior engineer, looked exhausted but determined. "Mr. Thompson, we've got new test results. It's not good." The morning devolved into a series of crisis meetings. The hybrid systems issues were worse than they'd thought, threatening to delay the project by months. The engineering team was divided on solutions, and tension filled every discussion. Around noon, Alexandra appeared in his office. "Mike, we need to talk." He barely looked up from the test reports. "Can it wait? We're trying to salvage this before the board presentation." "No, it can't wait." Something in her tone made him finally look up. She closed the door behind her, worry evident in her expression. "You're pushing too hard. The team is exhausted, you're exhausted, and we're missing something obvious because nobody's taking time to think clearly." "We don't have time," Mike protested. The board works for me," Alexandra cut in, "not the other way around. And right now, I'm more concerned about you than their timeline." "I can't fail at this," Mike said quietly. "This project, it's everything we've been working toward, proving that old and new can work together. Is that what this is really about?" Alexandra moved closer, her voice softening. "Or is it about proving something to yourself?" The question hung in the air between them. Before Mike could answer, another knock came at the door. An urgent problem with the prototype required his immediate attention. "Go," Alexandra said, disappointment evident in her voice. "But Mike, we're not done with this conversation." The afternoon passed in a blur of technical discussions and failed attempts at solutions. By evening, Mike found himself alone in the workshop, staring at the Belair. Its classic line seemed to mock him now, a symbol of his struggle to bridge two worlds. He was so focused on the car that he didn't hear Sarah return until she spoke. "You know what you always told me about tough problems," she said, making him jump. "Sometimes you have to step back to see the solution." "Sarah." "No, Dad, listen. You've been so focused on proving yourself in this new world that you've forgotten what made you special in the old one." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "At the garage, your best solutions came when you stepped away. Got perspective. Remember Mrs. Henderson's mysterious engine knock? You solved it while watching birds at the feeder." Mike smiled despite himself. "That's because the rhythm of their pecking matched the—" He stopped, something clicking in his mind. The rhythm. "That's it!" He grabbed his phone, texting the team. The power fluctuations weren't random. They had a pattern like the birds at the feeder. They'd been so focused on the electrical systems that they'd missed the mechanical timing issue. But as he reached for his laptop to document the insight, Sarah took it away. "Tomorrow," she said firmly. "Right now, there's someone you need to talk to. Someone who deserves more than your exhausted, work-obsessed attention." Mike looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw not just Sarah, but a reflection of his own stubbornness. She was right. Some things were more important than work, even work you loved. He picked up his phone again, this time to make a different call. "Alexandra, can we talk? And this time it's not about the car." The family calendar hanging in Mike's kitchen told the story of their new life in colorful pen marks and post-it notes. Sarah's internship schedule overlapped with his board meetings. Alexandra's dinner dates were marked alongside community center planning sessions. Even Eddie's updates about the garage renovation had their place, everything finally finding its rhythm. Mike studied the calendar while waiting for his coffee to brew, remembering the conversation with Alexandra that had changed everything. They'd met at their favorite diner well after midnight, both too tired to maintain professional facades. "I fell in love with the mechanic who fixed my Ferrari," she'd said quietly, stirring her coffee. "The one who took time to do things right, who knew when to step back and think. Somewhere along the way, he got lost in trying to be someone else." Her words had hit home, making him see how he'd been approaching everything like a repair job, with an impossible deadline. Life wasn't an engine you could force into submission through sheer determination. The next morning, he'd called a team meeting, but instead of diving into technical discussions, he'd done something different. He'd shared stories about his years in the garage, about learning to balance work with raising Sarah, about understanding that sometimes the best solutions come when you least expect them. "We've been attacking this problem like it's a race," he'd told them, "but the best work I ever did came from taking time to understand what I was fixing. So today, we're going to slow down and think." The team's relief had been palpable. They'd spent the morning just studying the Belair, sharing observations and ideas without pressure. By afternoon, 3 different solutions to the power fluctuation problem had emerged naturally from their discussions. Now, 2 weeks later, the project was back on track, but with a different energy. The calendar showed the new approach: regular breaks scheduled between testing sessions, team dinners as important as technical reviews, time blocked out for both work and life. "Morning, Dad." Sarah breezed into the kitchen, already dressed. "For the lab? Don't forget we're meeting Alexandra for lunch. She wants to show us the community center plans." The community center, what used to be his garage, had become a symbol of this new balance. The renovation preserved the heart of the old building while adapting it for its new purpose. Just like him. At the hub, Mike found his team already, gathered around the Belair, but they weren't working yet. Instead, Derek was showing pictures of his daughter's first science fair project. "She built it all herself," Derek beamed. "Said she was inspired by our hybrid system design." Mike smiled, remembering similar proud moments with Sarah. "That's what this is all about, isn't it? Passing on knowledge, inspiring the next generation." The morning's work flowed smoothly, everyone fresher and more focused. The power distribution issue that had seemed insurmountable 2 weeks ago was now resolved, the solution elegant in its simplicity. They'd needed that step back to see it. Clearly, at lunch, Alexandra spread the community center plans across their table. The design incorporated elements of the old garage. The original sign would remain, and the main work area would become a hands-on learning space. "Eddie's been amazing," Alexandra reported. "He's already organized a youth mentorship program. Says he learned from the best." Mike felt a surge of pride. He always understood what the garage was really about. Not just fixing cars, but helping people learn and grow. "Speaking of learning and growing," Sarah interjected, pulling out her phone, "the quantum research team wants to incorporate some of our hybrid system principles into their new project. They say practical applications help them think differently about theoretical problems." Alexandra reached for Mike's hand under the table. "Looks like building bridges between old and new is becoming a family tradition." The afternoon brought a board presentation, but this time Mike approached it differently. Instead of just showing technical data, he shared the story of the project, how combining traditional wisdom with innovation had created something greater than either could achieve alone. When he finished, the board members weren't just impressed by the technical achievements, they were moved by the larger vision of progress that honored tradition while embracing the future. Later, as the sun set behind the hub's gleaming windows, Mike found Alexandra in his office, looking at his father's old toolbox. "Happy?" she asked, drawing him close. Mike thought about the calendar in his kitchen, about Sarah's excitement for her work, about his team's renewed energy, about the community center taking shape in his old garage, about how love, like engineering, was about finding the right balance. "Yeah," he said, kissing her softly. "I really am." The new garage design specifications lay across Mike's desk, but these weren't for the community center. They were for something entirely new, a state-of-the-art restoration facility that would be part of the innovation hub, combining traditional craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology. "Your father would love this," Alexandra said, studying the plans over his shoulder. The facility would include training spaces, research areas, and most importantly, a fully equipped workshop where the art of mechanical restoration would be preserved and passed on. "It's funny," Mike replied, his finger tracing the outline of what would become the main work area. "When I left the garage, I thought I was leaving that part of my life behind. Instead, it's grown into something bigger than I ever imagined." The Belair project had exceeded everyone's expectations. Its successful completion had not only proved their concept, but had attracted attention from classic car enthusiasts and tech innovators alike. People were fascinated by the idea of preserving vintage vehicles while making them environmentally friendly. "Mr. Thompson?" Eddie's voice came from the doorway. He'd grown more confident in his new role at the community center, but still maintained that respectful tone. "We've got our first youth class starting next week. I was hoping you might come speak to them." Mike smiled, remembering his own early days learning at his father's side. "Wouldn't miss it. What's the topic?" "Basic engine principles," Eddie grinned. "Thought we'd start with the fundamentals, just like you taught me." After Eddie left, Alexandra perched on the edge of Mike's desk. "You know, when I first planned these innovation hubs, I never imagined this kind of community impact. The technical advances are important, but what's happening here, the knowledge being passed down, the bridges being built between generations, that's the real innovation." The afternoon found them in the workshop, where the Belair sat, gleaming under the lights. A film crew was documenting their project, interviewing team members about the process of merging traditional automotive craft with modern technology. Sarah had become one of their most articulate spokespeople, easily explaining complex technical concepts in ways that connected with both old-school mechanics and tech enthusiasts. Mike watched proudly as she demonstrated how they'd preserved the car's classic feel while incorporating sustainable systems. "The real breakthrough," she was telling the interviewer, "wasn't just technical. It was understanding that progress doesn't mean abandoning tradition. It means building on it, respecting it, helping it evolve." During a break in filming, Mike found himself working under the Belair's hood, making small adjustments more out of habit than necessity. The familiar actions centered him, even as he heard the busy sounds of the innovation hub around him. "Some things never change." Alexandra's voice came from beside the car. "Give you an engine to tinker with, and you're in your happy place." Mike straightened up, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "You know what I realized? This is still exactly what I was doing at the garage. Fixing things, solving problems, helping people. The scale is different, but the heart of it is the same. That's why it works so well," she replied, handing him the wrench he'd been reaching for without being asked. "You never tried to become someone else. You just found a bigger way to be yourself." The day wound down with a team gathering in the break room. Derek's daughter was showing off her science fair trophy, inspired by their hybrid system. Mrs. Henderson had brought pie from the diner, maintaining her tradition of feeding the garage boys, even though the garage was now a high-tech facility. "Remember when you thought taking this job meant leaving your old life behind?" Sarah asked, settling next to Mike with a slice of pie. He looked around the room, at Eddie discussing teaching plans with the engineering team, at Alexandra deep in conversation with Mrs. Henderson about the community center's impact, at the mixture of old friends and new colleagues sharing stories and ideas. "Turns out you can't leave your life behind," he replied. "You can only build on it, make it stronger, help it grow." Through the windows he could see the sun setting behind the Innovation Hub's modern architecture. In the reflection, he caught a glimpse of his father's old toolbox, now displayed prominently in the workshop as a reminder of their roots. The past and future had found their balance, not just in the Belair's engineering, but in every aspect of their lives. Each day brought new challenges, new opportunities to bridge the gap between tradition and innovation, between the wisdom of experience and the promise of progress. And at the heart of it all was the simple truth his father had taught him long ago, that the best kind of change doesn't erase what came before. It honors it, builds on it, and carries it forward into something even better. The small velvet box felt heavy in Mike's pocket as he worked on the Belair's final adjustments. Tomorrow, the car would be unveiled at a major tech conference, but tonight he had something more important planned. The ring inside the box had belonged to his grandmother, a simple, elegant design that reminded him of Alexandra's understated grace. "Need any help?" Sarah's voice made him jump slightly. She smiled knowingly at his reaction. "Nervous about tomorrow's presentation?" "The presentation's the easy part," Mike replied, closing the Belair's hood with practiced care. "It's what comes after that has my hands shaking." Sarah moved closer, lowering her voice though they were alone in the workshop. "Does Alexandra suspect anything?" "I don't think so. She's been focused on the conference." He pulled out the ring box, opening it one more time to check its contents. "You're sure about this, honey? It would change things for all of us." "Dad," Sarah's tone was gentle but firm. "I haven't seen you this happy since, well, ever. And Alexandra, she looks at you like you're her favorite classic car, perfectly restored but with some exciting modern upgrades." Mike laughed, tension easing from his shoulders. "That's quite a metaphor." "Well, I am your daughter. I know how to speak your language." She hugged him tightly. "Now don't overthink this like you do with engine timing. Some things just need to happen naturally." The workshop slowly emptied as evening approached. Mike had arranged everything carefully. A private dinner after the final conference preparations, just him and Alexandra in the same diner where they'd shared pie that first night. He found her in her office, surrounded by presentation materials, but looking completely at ease. That was one of the things he loved about her, how she could move between worlds so effortlessly, never losing her authentic self. "Ready to call it a day?" he asked from her doorway. "I thought we could grab dinner, celebrate tomorrow's big reveal a little early." Alexandra looked up, her smile warming him like sunshine. "Perfect timing. I was just thinking about our first late night diner run. That's actually why I thought we'd go back there tonight," Mike said, his hand unconsciously touching the box in his pocket, kind of bringing things full circle. The diner was quiet, just a few regulars at the counter. Their usual booth waited for them, and Mrs. Henderson herself brought their coffee, despite having supposedly retired months ago. "You two look like you're plotting something special," she said with a knowing wink as she set down their mugs. Mike wondered if the whole town was in on his secret. As they talked over dinner, Mike found himself remembering every step of their journey. The broken-down Ferrari, the late-night repair, the job offer that changed everything. Each moment had led them here, to this quiet evening on the edge of something new. "You're unusually contemplative tonight," Alexandra observed, reaching across the table to take his hand. "Everything okay?" Mike squeezed her hand gently. "I was just thinking about timing belts." She raised an eyebrow. "Romantic." "No, hear me out," he continued, a smile playing at his lips. "You know how, in an engine, timing is everything. All the parts have to move in perfect synchronization, but when it's right, when everything lines up just the way it should." He paused, gathering his courage. "That's how I feel about us." Alexandra's eyes softened with understanding. Before she could speak, Mike stood up, then knelt beside their booth. The few diner patrons fell silent, watching. "Alexandra Chen," he said, voice steady despite his racing heart. "You brought your Ferrari to my garage that night, but you ended up fixing something much more important. You helped me see that life, like engineering, is about adaptation, growth, and knowing when you found the perfect match." He pulled out the ring box, opening it carefully. "Will you marry me?" Alexandra's eyes filled with tears, but her smile was radiant. "On one condition," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Mike's heart skipped. "What's that?" "Promise me you'll never stop tinkering, never stop teaching, never stop being the mechanic who stayed late to fix my car." "That's an easy promise to make," Mike replied. "It's who I am, who you helped me continue to be." "Then yes," Alexandra said simply, pulling him up to kiss him. "Absolutely yes." The diner erupted in applause. Mrs. Henderson was openly crying, and Mike could have sworn he saw Sarah's face peeking through the window. But all he could focus on was Alexandra's smile as he slipped his grandmother's ring onto her finger. Sometimes, he thought, the best engineering solutions were also the simplest, like two people finding each other, like old wisdom meeting, new dreams, like love built on respect, understanding, and the courage to build something beautiful together. The family photo captured the moment perfectly. Sarah in her graduation gown, proudly holding her Princeton diploma, flanked by Mike and Alexandra, their faces glowing with pride and joy. Behind them, the restored Belair gleamed in the summer sun, a fitting symbol of their journey together. "I still can't believe you drove it all the way to New Jersey," Sarah said, admiring the car as they walked across campus after the ceremony. "Though I suppose it was the perfect way to show off the project's success. Your father insisted," Alexandra laughed, her hand comfortably entwined with Mike's. "Said something about proper transportation for a quantum physics graduate." Mike smiled, watching his daughter walk ahead of them, her graduation cap tilted at a jaunty angle. The past year had brought more changes than he could have imagined, each one feeling more right than the last. The Innovation Hub had expanded, with 3 more restoration projects underway. The community center, under Eddie's leadership, had become a model for technical education programs across the country. And next month, he and Alexandra would marry in a ceremony that would blend tradition and innovation, just like everything else in their lives. "Dr. Thompson," a voice called out, and Sarah turned to greet one of her professors. "I just wanted to say again how impressed we were with your thesis on practical applications of quantum mechanics in automotive engineering. The way you combined theoretical physics with real-world mechanical principles was revolutionary." Sarah's smile was pure joy. "I had good teachers," she said, glancing back at Mike and Alexandra. "I learned that the best solutions come from understanding both the theory and the practice." As they walked through Princeton's historic campus, Mike felt the weight of the moment. His daughter had not only achieved her dream, but had found a way to carry forward everything he'd taught her, merging it with her own brilliant path. "You know what this reminds me of?" Alexandra said softly, squeezing his hand. "That night in your garage when Sarah brought us dinner. Even then, she saw something we hadn't figured out yet. She's always been the smartest one in the family." Mike agreed. "Gets that from her mother's side, I'm sure." Alexandra stopped, turning to face him. "No, she gets it from you. The ability to see how things fit together, to understand what makes them work. That's all you, Mike Thompson." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the campus lawns as they made their way back to the Belair. Students and parents stopped to admire the car, and Sarah proudly explained its unique features, the perfect blend of classic design and sustainable technology. "Ready to head home?" Mike asked, opening the car doors. The engine purred to life with its distinctive sound, part vintage muscle, part future innovation. "Actually," Sarah said, a familiar, mischievous glint in her, I have news. The Quantum Research Facility at the Innovation Hub, they offered me a position. I'll be working on applying quantum principles to next-generation sustainable engines." Mike felt his heart swell. "You're coming home? Well, somebody has to keep you two focused on the future," Sarah grinned. "Besides, Eddie says he needs help with the advanced programming courses at the community center." As they drove home, the Belair performing flawlessly, Mike thought about all the turns his life had taken. From a small-town mechanic to the head of practical applications at a cutting-edge facility. From a single dad worried about college tuition to watching his daughter graduate from Princeton. From fixing a broken-down Ferrari to finding a love that made everything in his life run better. The sun was setting as they pulled into town, casting a golden glow over the Innovation Hub's modern silhouette. The old garage, now the thriving community center, stood nearby, its restored sign a proud reminder of where it all began. "Home, sweet home," Alexandra said, and the words carried the weight of everything they'd built together. Mike looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror, at his fiancée beside him, at the town that had supported his journey, and at the future stretching out before them like an open road. Some people might say it was all just luck, a chance breakdown, a late-night repair, a kind gesture. But Mike knew better. Like any good engineering solution, it was about having the right parts, the right tools, and most importantly, the right people to help you build something extraordinary. It wasn't the end of their story. In many ways, it was just the beginning, but it was exactly the beginning they were meant to have.